Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. The war in Gaza is escalating after being on the run for months. Hamas attacked Tel Aviv over the weekend. They fired 8 rockets from Rafah. A deadly counterattack followed. Despite the orders from the world's top court to cease operations, Israel has been striking Rafah. At least 40 people have been killed. The conflict in Gaza, like we said, is spiraling. And no side, it seems, is willing to concede. But can Israel continue to keep fighting? We ask because there are growing reports of dissent within the Israeli army. Meanwhile, the US and Saudi Arabia are patching up. Washington is wooing Riyadh with new weapons. In China, Xi Jinping's wife, Peng Liyuan, has been given a new role. She will now test the loyalty of the PLA's generals. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has hopped next door to Germany. It's the first state visit from Paris to Berlin in more than 2 decades. In the US, McDonald's and Burger King have sparked the ultimate fast food war. And can rainbow colors help you sleep better? We'll get you all these stories and more. The headlines first. The record run of India's stock market continues. Sensex and Nifty opened at all-time highs today. Sensex crossed the 76,000 mark for the first time. This was led by a rally in global markets as well as banking and financial services stocks. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi hits out at the opposition over alleged support from Pakistan. Prime Minister Modi calls for an investigation. It comes after former Pakistani Minister Chaudhry Fawad Hussain praised Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal. Earlier, the Pakistani politician had also praised Congress leader Rahul Gandhi. Saudi Arabia says Israel cannot exist without a Palestinian state. Its foreign minister calls for building momentum on the two-state solution. Saudi Arabia does not recognize Israel as a state, but growing cooperation between the two countries in recent years has raised hopes for a normalization agreement. North Korea fires a suspected ballistic missile over the Yellow Sea. Japan issues evacuation orders in the south of the country. The provocation comes just hours after South Korea, Japan and China wrapped up their first summit since 2019. Before the trilateral talks, Pyongyang had threatened to launch another spy satellite. More than 2,000 people are feared buried in a landslide in Papua New Guinea. The government asks for international help. The United Nations has called an emergency meeting tomorrow. Friday's landslide was triggered by heavy rains. Papua New Guinea has one of the wettest climates in the world. And early voting begins in South Africa. Most of the country will vote on Wednesday, but more than 600,000 of the elderly and essential workers voted today. The ruling African National Congress, or ANC, is facing its biggest challenge yet. The results will be announced by Sunday.
יואב גלנט, אתה לא יכול לנצח מלחמה. תתפטר.
We start with the war in Gaza. It's been more than 230 days of intense fighting. And recently, it's been one-way traffic. Israel bombing relentlessly and Hamas on the run. But over the weekend, Hamas tried to hit back. They launched a rare counterattack, that too on Tel Aviv. Take a look at these pictures. Israel counted 8 rockets. They were fired from Rafah. They flew almost 100 kilometers to Tel Aviv. It's one of the biggest cities in Israel, also the country's commercial capital. Tel Aviv was last targeted around 4 months back. Since then, it's been largely peaceful. That peace was disrupted on Sunday. Israel says they shot down most of the Hamas rockets, but air raid sirens did go off.
Pnima.
Why did Hamas do this? Was it to send a message to Israel's government, or was it to intimidate Israeli civilians? Either way, it's a strange decision because public opinion was turning firmly against Israel, but this attack could change it again. It has confirmed two things for us. One, that Hamas still has the means to strike Israeli cities, and two, they also have the will to do it. Basically, Hamas proved Benjamin Netanyahu's point. So Israel hit back. They targeted the southern city of Rafah. Bombs were dropped on an area meant for displaced Gazans. Video showed a massive fire at the camp. And casualties? The exact number is not clear yet, but reports say at least 40 people were killed, including women and children.
Suddenly, we heard the sound of a missile. We ran and found the street covered in smoke. We did not see anything. We went into the house and did not find anyone when we checked over the wall and found a girl and a young man who had been cut into pieces.
There is no security, not for a child, an elderly man, or for a woman. Here he is with his wife. They were martyred. They are gone. He left the children, the innocent ones. What have they done to deserve this? The children have been orphaned.
It's horrifying. But was it also deliberate? Well, there is no other explanation. A refugee camp is pretty obvious on a map, so bombing it is a deliberate act, and not a new one for Israel, by the way. They have repeatedly been accused of targeting civilians. But this time, there is more outrage because of these pictures. We've seen babies being rushed out of hospitals and civilians burnt alive in the inferno. So Israel has been forced to give an explanation. A military prosecutor called this incident grave. She also said it is under investigation.
Some incidents, like last night's incident in Rafah, are very difficult. The details of yesterday's incident are still under an investigation, which we are committed to conducting to the fullest extent. Israel Defense Forces regrets any harm to non-combatants during the war.
Couple of things to note here. First of all, this is not collateral damage. This is deliberate targeting. And secondly, it's a backward step by both sides. Hamas did the same thing on October 7. They unleashed a brutal terror attack on Israel. And who paid for it? The people of Gaza. 8 months later, they have done it again. Instead of peace, Hamas chose violence. Same with Israel. Last week was a political nightmare for them. A United Nations court asked Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop the Rafah offensive. A prosecutor is trying to arrest him. And what does he do? Bomb a refugee camp. Netanyahu is trying to capitalize on recent events. In his speech, it is not Netanyahu versus global courts. It is Israel versus the world. It's a pitch that can potentially unite Israelis, but only in the short run. In the long run, people will only remember two things: who won and how did they win. And that's the worry for Netanyahu. Many Israelis disagree with his methods. They want him to focus on talks, on getting hostages released from Gaza. Others think that he should push on, destroy Hamas even at the cost of civilian lives. And the biggest worry? These divisions are seeping into the military. Take a look at this video. It shows an IDF soldier somewhere in Gaza. The graffiti behind him is linked to an outlawed Jewish supremacist group. And what is he saying in this video? That Defense Minister Yoav Gallant must quit. Now, Gallant has questioned Netanyahu's policy. He wants Israel to focus on post-war Gaza. But Netanyahu says, let's beat Hamas first. And this soldier in the video backs the Prime Minister. He wants complete victory over Hamas in Gaza. If not, then he says 100,000 soldiers will revolt. And this is unprecedented. Israel's army has always been apolitical. They have never picked sides in domestic squabbles. So why are they doing it now? Because October 7th has divided the country. Around 70% Israelis want to fight until Hamas is defeated, but 62% also say that total victory is impossible. Plus, Prime Minister Netanyahu is deeply unpopular. 71% Israelis want him to resign, either now or right after the war. They want him to go. We saw evidence of that on Saturday. A massive anti-government protest was organized in Tel Aviv. Thousands of people turned up, including families of hostages in Gaza. Most of them had the same message. War won't get our family back, only negotiations will. But the question is, can the talks resume? It depends on political will. Hamas's rocket attack does not inspire confidence. Neither does Israel's response. Negotiations are the need of the hour because this war is changing both sides permanently. Gaza is now a scarred land, both physically and socially, and Israel's divisions are threatening their most prized institution, their army. So now is the time to pause and pull back. Now let's talk about the other war, Russia versus Ukraine. Over the weekend, Ukrainian President Zelensky issued a video message. It was an appeal to Joe Biden and Xi Jinping. Zelensky wants them to attend the Peace Summit next month. It's being hosted by Switzerland. More than 80 countries are attending this summit. Joe Biden and Xi Jinping are yet to confirm their attendance. More importantly, no Russian representative will be there. You could say it defeats the purpose of the summit, and you would have a point. How can there be a peace deal without Russia? Also, from the looks of it, Moscow has a different plan altogether. It seems to be preparing for a new phase of the war. The Russian president is revamping his forces. Putin's plan has two parts. One, a cleanup, and two, an expansion. Let's tell you about the first step. A high-level purge is underway in Russia. In the last 1 month, 5 top defense officials have been arrested in the country. It began with this man, Timur Ivanov, a former deputy defense minister. Ivanov was arrested for taking bribes. He was close to Sergei Shoigu, the former defense minister of Russia. He was sacked just 2 weeks ago. Putin replaced him with Andrei Belousov. The switch triggered a lot of speculation because Belousov is an unlikely pick. He has no military experience, he's an economist, and he's been given charge of the defense ministry in the middle of a war. So obviously questions were asked. But now the move has started to make sense. Apparently there was rampant corruption in the Russian military, and as defense minister, Shoigu protected many corrupt officials. Reports say this bothered the Russian president. In fact, according to one report, Putin's patience had quote-unquote snapped. So he ordered a change of guard to clean up the system. Shoigu was removed as defense minister, Belousov was brought in, and since then there's been a churn in Russia's defense ministry. More high-profile arrests have been made, including the head of the personnel department, the communication department chief, an official from the procurement department, a deputy chief of the military general staff, and a former top commander in Ukraine. All of these men have been rounded up, arrested, and charged with corruption. The Kremlin was asked about these arrests. It tried to play them down.
The fight against corruption is consistent work. It's not a campaign, it's constantly ongoing work. It is an integral part of the activities of our law enforcement agencies. I cannot give any details as I am not authorized to do it. There is no way to speak about a campaign. The fight against corruption continues in all departments, be it federal departments or at the municipal level. This is all I can say.
Russia says this is business as usual, but its actions suggest otherwise. The purge could be part of a preparation, perhaps for a bigger offensive. And that's the second part of Putin's plan. Russia is expanding its fighting force. Take a look at these numbers. Russian forces are adding 30 to 40,000 soldiers every month. Since last year, more than 385,000 soldiers have been added to the army, 385,000 soldiers. Since the war began in Ukraine, the Russian military has grown in size. The forces are now 15% bigger. So when did this expansion begin? In December last year, when Putin signed a decree, it helped add nearly 170,000 personnel. The total strength of the Russian armed forces now stands at 1.32 million soldiers. And where are these soldiers being recruited from? A lot of them come from Russian jails. That's right, a lot of them are criminals. Moscow is promising them amnesty. Also good wages to fight on the front. Here's what the average package for a soldier looks like. The monthly salary is anywhere between $2,100 to $2,700, which is 3 times the average wage in Russia. Plus, there's a joining bonus, a whopping $11,000. If the soldier gets hurt or killed in action, their family receives large payouts or compensation. This is what's drawing many criminals to join the Russian forces. Amnesty plus a large salary. The offer is too hard to pass up. Last year, more than 50,000 troops left Russian prisons and ended up on the front lines with Ukraine. What does all of this mean for Kiev? Zelensky believes that Putin will be keeping this war going. He says Russia wants to undermine the peace summit first and then launch a bigger offensive.
No one in the world is interested in this war except the aggressor itself, and everyone actually understands this. The peace summit is a format that will not allow Putin to lie any longer. And without lies, he is absolutely nothing. I thank everyone in the world who helps us organize the summit and shows their leadership to bring true peace closer.
That's why Zelensky wants support from the US and China. Without their help, it would be hard to convince Putin. Russia is under no pressure to end the war. A statement from Vladimir Putin last week confirmed that.
Of course, we realize that the legitimacy of the incumbent head of state has expired. I think that one of the aims of the forthcoming conference in Switzerland is such that the Western community, the sponsors of the Kiev regime, could confirm the legitimacy of the acting head of state, or rather already non-acting.
You heard him. The Russian president says Zelensky is not a legitimate leader of Ukraine, and this poses a challenge for Zelensky. He's trying to rally support for a peace conference that cannot deliver peace, as his adversary ramps up his forces, possibly for a bigger offensive. Our next story is about a patch-up. Not the celebrity kind. This is a geopolitical patch-up. Between whom? Saudi Arabia and Joe Biden. Actually, if you think about it, this was very much like a celebrity patch-up. You had a public falling out, some name-calling, some ghosting, and finally, a reluctant rekindling. Let me take you back to 2021. Joe Biden had just moved into the White House. One of his first major foreign policy moves was this. Biden stopped selling offensive weapons to Saudi Arabia, things like missiles and rockets. He stopped selling them. And why did he do this? Because of the civil war in Yemen. Saudi Arabia had entered this war in 2015. They fought against the pro-Iran Houthis in Yemen, but multiple reports accused Saudi Arabia of excesses, like targeting civilians and carpet bombing cities. So Joe Biden turned activist. On the campaign trail, he criticized Saudi Arabia. He made 2 specific promises. 1, ending military sales, and 2, making the kingdom a pariah. Listen to this.
We were not going to, in fact, sell more weapons to them. We were going to, in fact, make them pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are.
Well, he's broken both promises. As President Biden traveled to Saudi Arabia, you may remember his fist bump with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Not very pariah-making behavior, is it? And the other promise? Well, that could be broken too. Reports say Biden is poised to reverse his ban, meaning he wants to sell offensive weapons to Riyadh now. And this sums up Biden's time in office. More U-turns than at the local driving school. But the question is, why? What changed between 2021 and now? Mainly 2 things. 1, there is a truce in Yemen. The United Nations brokered a deal in 2022. MBS is apparently looking to exit this war. And reason number 2, Biden needs Saudi Arabia. MBS played his cards pretty well. When Russia invaded Ukraine, he refused to criticize Moscow. He also worked with Putin to manage the oil markets, and that was a shock for Biden. He later flew down to Saudi Arabia, even had that fist bump with MBS, and yet he got a cold shoulder there. Now we have a war in Gaza. Saudi Arabia is the leader of the Arab world, so their opinion and their support matters. Washington needs their help to end the war. And how will they do it? With a normalization deal, a deal that normalizes relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. That's what they're aiming for. And this deal is set to include 3 main points. The US and Saudi Arabia will sign a defense pact. Saudi Arabia will recognize Israel, and Israel will stop the Gaza war and move towards a 2-state solution, meaning the creation of 2 states, one Israeli and one Palestinian. That is the deal. Is that why Biden is giving weapons to Riyadh, to sweeten the deal? American officials say that is not the case, but the timing is suspicious. And Biden's decision will have a major impact. It could tilt the regional power balance. In fact, let's look at 2 questions here again. 1, what weapons does Saudi Arabia stand to get? And 2, what has the US already sold to them? Riyadh will have a wish list. At the top of it will be the F-35s, America's 5th-generation fighter jet, probably the deadliest warplane in the world. Riyadh has tried to acquire it in the past, but Biden repeatedly blocked the sales. If he agrees, Saudi Arabia will be the first Arab country to get F-35s. Another item is precision munitions, a bit like smart bombs. They can change their trajectory to hit the target. Very important in new age conflicts. And what have the Saudis got in the past? Under Donald Trump, Riyadh had a blast. Trump was very close to MBS, so he approved multiple military sales. Saudi Arabia was the leading buyer of American arms. They bought around 23% of the total. 23%, how much was that? In 2017, it was worth $18 billion. $18 billion every year during peacetime. What sort of weapons did Riyadh buy? Laser-guided missiles, anti-tank missiles, Patriot missiles, F-15 fighter jets, Abrams battle tanks, and Black Hawk helicopters. So pretty much everything that America sells. And now Saudi Arabia wants more. From their perspective, you can understand why. Why do they want more weapons? The equations in their region have changed. Iran and Israel have turned their shadow war into a real fight. They fired drones and missiles at each other. Plus, the Houthis in Yemen are emboldened. They're holding ships hostage in the Red Sea. Saudi Arabia shares a 1,300-kilometer border with Yemen. Its Red Sea coast is almost 2,000 kilometers long. So Riyadh wants assurances. It wants weapons to defend itself. And Joe Biden cannot really say no. He can't afford Riyadh buying arms from China or Russia. So what does he do? Make another U-turn. It makes strategic sense for the US president. But it makes an already dangerous region even more dangerous. For our next story, I want you to look at a picture. Look at this picture. Do you know that woman on the right? Who is this woman? The one who's dressed in military uniform. That's Peng Liyuan, the wife of Xi Jinping, the president of China. Now, we don't know when this picture was taken, but we can tell you that it's circulating on Chinese social media. It has been circulating recently. Peng was visiting a military university. What for? I will quote what she was there for. To investigate the construction of a high-level talent team. This is from a media report. These are the words they used. Construction of a high-level talent team. Peng was not alone. Officers from the Chinese military were there. And here's something that you should know. Peng has never served as a soldier. She is not an expert in military matters, but these military officers around Peng find themselves answering to her because she has been promoted to a new position where she can dictate their future in the Chinese military. Not only because she's the president's wife, but also because she has a bigger official role in the Chinese army now. Peng is working with China's Central Military Commission, or CMC. This is the apex decision-making body in military matters, the top body in military matters. Xi Jinping chairs the CMC, and his wife Peng is now part of a committee. It's called the Cadre Assessment Committee. What does this body do? Apparently, it vets future military leaders. It assesses whether they're loyal to the Communist Party or not. And any Chinese soldier would know this. If you're looking to rise to the top, loyalty to the party is paramount, more important than your military skill or aptitude. And now Peng Liyuan will be the judge of this. She will determine if a soldier is loyal enough or not. So anyone seeking a promotion to higher ranks in China will have to pass Peng's loyalty test first. And this is not her first gig with the PLA, the Chinese army. She used to be a singer. Back in 1984, she joined the PLA's music band. In the following years, she rose through the ranks. In 2009, Peng got a promotion. She was awarded the rank of Major General. Then, as First Lady of China, she served as the Dean of the PLA Academy of Arts. And while serving in these positions, she is believed to have kept a low profile. But that is changing. She has been given a bigger role now. Reports say Peng has been promoted to the rank of Lieutenant General. The Chinese mouthpieces did not report this, but word got out as she began discharging her new duties. Xi Jinping's wife is in charge of vetting the future generals of China. Why did he need her to do this? Perhaps because of insecurities as a leader. Let me explain this with what happened a few months back. There was a sweeping purge in the PLA, in the Chinese military. There was a purge. A total of 15 top-level officials were fired. This included their defense minister, Li Shangfu. They were all sacked without explanation. And some of these officers had been handpicked by Xi himself. Some of them were in charge of critical areas like China's nuclear weapons, yet they were all fired. And this crackdown shocked observers. It also exposed the depth of corruption in the Chinese military. So Xi Jinping had to bring some changes. He still signs off on all the top-level promotions in the PLA, but he needed someone to vet the candidates. So he turned to his wife. Peng is believed to be well connected in the military circles, and that should help. She's also helping her husband in diplomacy. She accompanied Xi Jinping on his recent tour of Europe. Wang Yi is China's foreign minister, and he said that First Lady diplomacy was a highlight of this European trip. Apparently, she played a positive role and enhanced China's goodwill in the region. So we may get to see more of Peng in the coming days. There is growing speculation now. Peng could be inducted into China's top decision-making body, the Politburo. Obviously, there's no official comment from Beijing. But one thing is quite clear. Xi Jinping is consolidating power, and he's running out of people he can trust. When we think climate change, many of us picture this: melting snow caps, rising sea levels, and record high temperatures somewhere in the future. Most people still wrongly believe that the consequences of climate change are distant and that they do not affect our daily lives today, which explains the snooze fest around climate action. But the fact is, climate change is happening right now. Cyclones are ravaging our coasts, turbulence is shaking our skies, it is plunging planes into chaos and injuring, even killing passengers on flights. This is not a future problem, it's a present crisis. And before you think, not this again, watch our next report.
Torrential rain, heavy winds, cancelled flights, toppled trees, damaged houses, snapped telephone lines, and millions of people left without power. On Sunday night, Cyclone Ramal made its landfall in the coastal regions of Bangladesh.
I've never seen such a lengthy cyclone in decades. Usually the storm stays for a couple of hours, but this one has been going since last night. Don't know when it will end.
Ramal was the first cyclone of this year for the region. It lashed the coastlines of India and Bangladesh, pounding the low-lying coasts of the South Asian neighbours. At least 16 people have died, and the death toll could rise further. In Bangladesh, 10 people lost their lives. At least 6 died in India's West Bengal. Both nations have moved nearly 1 million people to storm shelters. Nearly 3 million are without electricity. The damage is far worse in the Sundarbans shared by India and Bangladesh. It's the world's largest mangrove forest. Here the high tides breached protective embankments.
The cyclone made landfall at 6 p.m. yesterday. The wind is still blowing, raising the tide level. Due to the 10 to 12 hours of sustained winds and rain, the water level has risen by 8 to 10 feet.
Cyclones are not uncommon in this region. Since 1965, the Bangladesh coastline has seen 12 major cyclones. It has killed 450,000 people till date. But in the recent years, storms have become more frequent. The reason is climate change. Global warming is driving up temperatures. It's making our seas and oceans warmer. That leads to more intense cyclones, especially in the northern Bay of Bengal. So Ramal is clearly not going to be the last. But while the ocean waters are choppy, things aren't much better in the air. In fact, like the sea, it's quite the bumpy ride. On May 26th, 12 people were injured on a Qatar Airways flight. It was flying from Doha to Dublin. The flight encountered turbulence. Passengers were injured. And it's not a first. It comes just 5 days after a Singapore Airlines flight dropped 6,000 feet in 5 minutes. One person even died due to turbulence. Several others were severely injured. The reason? Climate change strikes again. It's turbocharging turbulence. You see, turbulence can be due to many reasons. It can be because of weather events like rain and storms. Then there's turbulence due to geography like mountains. But the turbulence these flights are experiencing is because of none of this. It's known as clear air turbulence. Basically, you're cruising at 35,000 feet. The conditions are cloudless. And suddenly, you're hit by a jet stream of air. It causes the flight to rise, fall, or even move sideways. Now, no one can predict this clear air turbulence. It can happen any time. And it's because of rising temperatures. It's leading to higher wind speeds and more such fast-flowing streams of air. Not just that, it costs the airline industry $500 million every year in damages caused to the aircraft. It shows you how climate change is changing the world. It's no more about freak weather events like cyclones, it's also disrupting our daily lives, on land, in the seas, and up above.
Now let's turn our attention to Europe. French President Emmanuel Macron is in Germany. He reached there yesterday. He is on a state visit, the first by a French president in 24 years, the first to Germany. This does not mean that Macron has never been to Germany before. He has plenty of times. But a state visit is not an ordinary trip. It's a ceremonial trip with full honors, a sign of friendship and close ties. It has a high symbolic value. Macron has been invited by the German president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier. They met yesterday.
Honorable President Macron, it is a pleasure to welcome you here for this state visit. A state visit 24 years after the last state visit from France. I'm delighted that you are here. I believe that the French-German friendship is of eminent importance for both our countries, an importance that cannot be overestimated. To put it even more clearly, Franco-German friendship is existential for our countries and also for Europe.
They spend the rest of the day treating the world to an array of photo ops. Macron being welcomed with military honors at the president's official residence, the Bellevue Castle in Berlin. Then the two presidents played foosball or table football. They both had help, of course, and the match ended in a 1-all draw. Macron then visited a real football pitch. a venue for the upcoming Euros near the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. There he exchanged jerseys with Steinmeier. Both presidents had their names on the other nation's uniform. At face value, it looks like everything is splendid, that Germany and France have never been closer. But this was mostly an act, a carefully choreographed display to give the illusion of strong ties and unwavering support, because in recent years the relationship has been tense ever since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It's the biggest war on European soil since the Second World War, and this has put the whole continent on edge. The cracks have begun to appear. Let's focus on just France and Germany for the moment. These two nations are the biggest in the European Union. They were considered the engines of Europe. Germany was the growth engine, France provided the military might. This has been the case since the end of the Second World War. Together, the Franco-German engine drove Europe forward. But the war in Ukraine has stalled this engine. The two chief components began to disagree. Take Macron's grand declaration in March. He refused to rule out sending troops to Ukraine. This invited a scathing rebuke from Olaf Scholz, the German chancellor. And that is not the only area of disagreement. There's also the issue of the Sky Shield. Germany is trying to deploy an air defense system across Europe, similar to Israel's Iron Dome. They want it for Europe. Berlin wants this up and running as soon as possible. So they want to buy air defense systems from the US. But Paris vehemently disagrees. It wants to build in Europe to make Europe less dependent on the Americans. So it has strategic autonomy. This is another issue where Germany and France have clashed in the last few years. So not everything is perfect between the two nations. But then you have Macron saying things like this.
Et de dire aussi à l'Europe et au monde,
and to tell Europe and the world that the state couple, it is neither old nor young, it is alive, demanding, ambitious for our two countries, ambitious for our Europe, and ambitious because I am convinced that our two countries carry something that is a little greater than even a certain idea of the universal.
quelque chose qui est un peu plus grand que même.
He called France and Germany a state couple. Macron certainly has a flair for the dramatic, but beyond the rhetoric, what is all of this about? Why are they trying so hard to show a unified front? Well, because elections are just around the corner. Elections for the European Parliament between the 6th and 9th of June. About 370 million Europeans will pick a new parliament. People from all EU member states. They will decide the future of Europe. Macron and Steinmeier and Scholz want a say in that future. But they're on the back foot. Their parties are trailing in the polls. Instead, you have Eurosceptic nationalist parties who are leading, like the National Rally in France or the Alternative for Germany party. They're expected to get more power in this EU election at the expense of leaders like Macron and Scholz. So Macron's state visit has a purpose. He wants to stop people from voting for the Eurosceptics. He wants to convince them that the present situation works, that the Franco-German engine will continue to drive Europe's growth. But will people buy it? Will the foosball and football theatrics convince them to maintain the status quo? We'll find out next month. Our next story is from Africa, from Burkina Faso in the west. The country is part of the so-called coup belt of Africa. Since the year 2020, this belt has seen 7 successful coups. There were 2 in Burkina Faso in just 2022, 2 coups. And the second coup left the nation with its present government, a military junta. The junta had promised that their rule was temporary. They had vowed to hand power back to a civilian government by July 2024. Well, it seems the junta is going back on its word. It plans to rule for 5 more years, meaning Burkina Faso won't see elections till the year 2029. Here's our report.
Burkina Faso's ruling military junta made an announcement on Saturday. The junta decided to extend its grip on power by 5 years. For another 5 years, Burkina Faso will be ruled by a military dictator. Most likely by this man, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's junta chief and interim president. Traoré has already been in power for over a year now. He took control of the country in October 2022 in a coup d'etat against another military junta that had taken control earlier that very year. Yes, Burkina Faso saw a double coup in 2022. The first coup was led by another officer, Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba. He ousted a democratically elected government. Damiba said the civilian government was not doing enough to combat terror in the country. So he justified the coup by promising to protect the country. He didn't really get a chance, though. A few months later, he was ousted by Traoré, who again promised to address Burkina Faso's terrorism problem. In fact, terrorism regularly plays a hand in inspiring military takeovers in the region. Burkina Faso is not unique. There have been 7 coups in the Sahel region since 2020. Along with Burkina Faso, coups have hit its neighbors, Niger, Mali, Chad and Guinea. 2 of these nations, Mali and Niger, also deal with terrorist insurgencies. There was public anger against the respective governments for failing to deal with the terror groups. The military capitalized on this anger and orchestrated coups. What has been the result? Well, terrorists are still around. The instability caused by the coups has allowed the terrorists to escalate their activities. In 2023, about 7,000 people were killed in Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger. This is according to ECOWAS, a grouping of West African nations. So despite the coups and the military being in charge, terror is on the rise. Meanwhile, basic needs are not being met. In Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger, 4.8 million people face food insecurity, and 2.4 million are internally displaced. So the military juntas have not proved to be good at governance. Despite this, they keep trying to hold on to power, saying they need more time to make things better. The Burkinabe junta is asking for 5 more years. Mali's junta recently asked for 3 more. Niger's junta took power last year, so it may be a few months before they announce an extension of their regime. And even if or when there's a return to civilian rule, there's no guarantee that the military won't be involved. Look at Chad, another coup-hit nation. Chad was taken over by a junta in 2021. The country held presidential elections this month, but the winner of the election happened to be the junta chief. Burkina Faso seems to be headed down the exact same path. Their military leader, Ibrahim Traoré, will be standing for elections in 2029 or whenever they are held. How fair will these elections be? If Chad is anything to go by, not at all. So the people of Burkina Faso are likely stuck with Traoré, or whichever military officer succeeds in overthrowing him, because it seems a coup is never far away in the West African Sahel.
It's the ultimate fast food war, McDonald's versus Burger King, 2 brands with a history of intense rivalry. They always try to one-up the other. So what monstrosity are they unveiling this time? Well, that's the thing. It's not some 20-topping burger or mega meal. It's a value dish. A meal worth just $5. McDonald's did it first. They're planning to roll it out by late June in the US. So Burger King jumped on. They're launching their own $5 meal. And they're doing it before McDonald's. First, let's look at these meals. What do you get for $5? Burger King is offering 4 things: a sandwich, nuggets, fries and a drink. McDonald's too is offering the same: a burger, 4 nuggets, small fries and a small drink. So pretty comprehensive for $5. But the question is why? Why the sudden dash for cheaper fast food? Because of inflation. Since 2022, the US has been gripped by a cost of living crisis. Average inflation was 8% in 2022. It fell to 4.1% in 2023, but Americans are still wary. It's a bit psychological too. Economic data shows that inflation is easing, but not everyone is buying it. This feeling even has a name. It's called vibe-session. A recent poll found that 68% Americans considered inflation to be the biggest concern. So numbers alone are not enough. People must feel that things have improved. A lot of them dipped into their savings in the last 2 years, so fast food is not on their wish list. Around 78% Americans considered fast food to be a luxury, and that translated to sales. In the last quarter, McDonald's missed their profit target. their first miss in 2 years. So what did they do? Unveil cheaper meals to attract customers. Another chain, Wendy's, is also doing it. Their latest offering is breakfast for $3. And why just food? Other sectors are also joining in. Target is one of the top retailers in the US. They have cut prices for 5,000 items. We're talking about daily use stuff like milk, bread and coffee. Another example is Walmart. It's known as an affordable shopping destination, yet Walmart is making changes. They unveiled a new label with 300 products. Around 70% of them are under $5. Now, this may look like market forces, but there is also political nudging here. In November last year, Joe Biden was asked about high grocery prices. He said, "Don't blame me, blame the grocery corporations."
Any corporation that's not brought their prices back down, even as inflation has come down, even as supply chains have been rebuilt, it's time to stop the price gouging and give the American consumer a break.
When Target slashed prices, Biden waded in. He said it was because of his appeal. Same in Canada. Last year, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau summoned top grocery firms. His message to them was simple: cut prices or face more taxes. Again, it worked. Of course, this is mostly a Western situation. In places like India, it's different. Supermarkets do not have this kind of power. More than 75% of India's grocery trade happens at local stores, the small and medium ones. But the principle remains the same. When inflation rises, companies are quick to charge more, but the opposite never happens. When inflation falls, companies take their own sweet time. They keep overcharging you. They lose sales, and eventually they tweak prices. It's good for consumers, though. Such tweaks often lead to price wars and sharp discounts. If you're on the lookout, you could be lucky. On 29th May 1953, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay did the impossible. They scaled the Mount Everest, the world's highest mountain. For the next 20 years, many tried to reach the peak. Only 600 succeeded. But now this number is achievable in just one season. And guess what that has led to? A traffic jam on Mount Everest, long queues of climbers stuck amidst mounds of snow and corpses. Sounds horrifying. But this is what the Everest climb looks like right now. Why is that? Is everyone suddenly a pro climber? Has the need for glory on social media led to people chasing the impossible? Our next report tells you.
Turkish drip coffees, fresh salads, baked cinnamon rolls, and high-speed Wi-Fi. I'm not describing an upcoming cafe, but this is what you get at the Everest Base Camp. Imagine that. At a height of 18,000 feet, you get all of this. But what happens when you go higher? When you head towards the summit? Forget gourmet meals, you'll be greeted by this. Bumper-to-bumper traffic on the world's highest peak. A queue of hundreds of climbers, all trying to reach the glorious peak. Some fall dead, but the others push on, passing their corpses like it's nothing. So how did it get so bad at the top of the world? In 1953, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay were the first to reach the peak. For the next 20 years, only 600 people achieved the feat. It was a month-long journey to the base camp, so only the brave attempted to climb. But things have since changed. It once took 600 people 20 years to reach the summit. Now, that number is achieved in a season. And the reason is ease of access. Like this airport in Lukla. With this, the journey to the base camp is now just an 8-day trek. Plus, technological advancements have made life easier. Gear is not as heavy. There are tracking devices. Oxygen is readily available. And if you're willing to pay the hefty price, you'll get experienced guides and Sherpas who carry everything to the top. What was once a feat of skill and courage is now an achievement to gloat on social media. And that's pushing more and more people to head for the peak. But this is the Everest we're talking about. Located at 29,000 feet, it's not an easy climb. But 90% of the people who attempt it now have no basic climbing skills. That leads to long queues, people falling sick, people dropping dead, huge mounds of garbage, and human excreta piling on the world's highest peak. Plus, there's climate change.
The mountain has become more complicated and challenging every year because of climate change.
So what's the solution? To curb over-tourism, Nepal is planning two things. First, hiking the permit fee. Right now, it costs $11,000 to scale the Everest. The Himalayan nation is raising it to $15,000. The second is curbing permits. A Nepal court has ordered a limit on the number of permits issued every season. Why? Because every year the number is going up, and the result is this: a traffic jam on Mount Everest. But Nepal argues differently. Tourism is crucial for its economy. And it's crucial for the Sherpas who scale the Everest every year. More tourists mean more income for them.
With an increase in tourism and mountaineering, the lifestyle of Sherpa is also getting better. Sherpa youths now have the opportunity to be educated, and so options have opened up.
The need of the hour is responsible tourism. Technology and ease of access are great things, but they should make the Everest safer and not more dangerous. It's not just about click, post, repeat. It's not just about reaching the peak, but also realizing the impact that the journey leaves on the mountain.
Noise. It comes from the Latin word nausea, which makes sense because noise can be a nuisance, it can be a distraction and interference, but not all noise is problematic. In fact, different colors of noise may help you, and you heard that right. Noise comes in a rainbow of colors. There is a whole spectrum. The most familiar among them is white noise. But now other colored noises like pink, brown and green are having a major moment. And this is not a bolt from the blue. We'll tell you why. But first, let's answer the golden question. What do we mean by colors of noises? You see, sound is a vibration, and different sounds vibrate at different frequencies. They form the colors of sound, just like the colors of light.
Sound is made up of waves, much like light, and we know a lot about light colors. On lower wavelengths of light, we have more red frequency, and on higher wavelengths, we have more bluish and violet frequencies. So in much the same way, sound can be described with colors based on the distribution of sound.
Let's take the example of white noise. It sounds like the static of a TV or radio. That's white noise. This noise emits all the frequencies audible to human ears, just like white light, which contains all the colors of light visible to the human eye. It's the same concept. So the two have the same name. And funnily enough, what makes these color noises special is that they're terribly boring, kind of like listening to someone drone. These noises continue without any change, so it is boring and the brain tunes out. And it makes other sounds less perceptible as well. So color noises mask other sounds, like the noise of screaming neighbors or honking cars, and this is especially true for white noise. People use it to drown out distractions. It may remind you of a horror movie, but many find it soothing. They listen to white noise while working or sleeping, and they call it sound therapy. Over the past decade, white noise has made so much buzz. People want more. So they're listening to the entire spectrum of colors, which includes brown noise. This has a very low pitch, kind of like a soothing rumble. That's brown noise. To many, it sounds like distant thunder or a waterfall. People say it helps them concentrate. Then there is green noise, which is a recent creation. Green noise may sound like the flow of waves. People use it to relax. But there is one noise color which has become an unlikely hit, and that is pink noise. It sounds like light rainfall or rustling leaves. People use it to fall asleep more easily, which makes pink noise a newly discovered treasure because in today's world, sleep is elusive. Globally, 62% adults do not get enough sleep. Over a third of adults have reported sleeping problems, so pink noise is gaining keen interest. According to new research, it can enhance sleep, improve memory and boost relaxation. But the research is still green. If it pans out, it can lead to pink noise medical devices that improve sleep and memory, and that would be groundbreaking. But for now, many questions remain unanswered, and this applies to the entire noise spectrum, really. Sure, noise has its benefits, especially for some people with health problems, sleep issues, or snoring partners. But this science is new. Only a few small studies have been conducted, and the quality of evidence is poor. For every study that lists a benefit, there is another warning you of risks. Noise can disrupt your sleep instead of enhancing it. When your auditory system cannot switch off at night, noise may leave you more tired. So lots of conflicting conclusions, but many have blacked that out because now noise is a commodity. It has been welcomed by the $15 billion global sleep market. Much like sleep trackers, AI-weighted blankets and hotel sleep suites. So enough research or not, color noise has the green light. And it is a big business. There are 12-hour-long playlists, noise machines, TikToks and apps. Some promise to make dishwasher noises. Others offer white noise plus sounds of chirping birds. If only there was a natural way to listen to these sounds. Now, I'm no auditory fortune teller, but when the next big offering is the sound of silence, you can color me surprised. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. The UAE sets the Guinness World Record for the largest solar power light bulb display. Paris turns its most famous street, the Champs-Élysées, into a picnic spot. And Bolivia's folk dance festival returns as thousands take to the streets. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1703, the city of St. Petersburg was founded by Peter the Great. It was established as a bridge between Russia and Europe. Soon it became the capital of the Russian Empire. Since then, St. Petersburg has seen a lot, from revolutions to war. Right now, it is Russia's second most important city after Moscow. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. We will see you tomorrow.
Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. South Africa goes to the polls on the 29th of May. I will track the election and bring you ground reports. Is it the end of the road for the African National Congress? And will former President Jacob Zuma stage a dramatic comeback? From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost.